life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk. Hi, this is Byrne, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk. It's a series of television shows in the format of an essay about life living, making a living, and sometimes loving. And occasionally we're blessed with a guest, and such is the case this evening. As a matter of fact, Rick Walker was with us last week, and we got into this idea of sales and sales managing and the challenges and what have you. And I want to continue it this evening with Rick because we don't get him here that often. And based on your background, your sales, and the mentoring that you've done with sales and sales managers, I know that some of your input here has a lot of background to it.
Oh, yes.
And so where should we start?
Well, it's such a favorite subject of ours, and we can start all over the place. But I think we were discussing the twilight zone of selling, where exactly a salesperson enters into. Hadn't really been prepared for sales. In other words, I hadn't planned on being in selling, but, and that's a big but, and how they're almost actually de-prepared coming into the environment. So why don't we pick it up there and kind of review a little bit from last week. What do we mean, de-prepared for selling?
Oh, you ever hear the expression, selling is okay if you're cut out for it? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't believe that's the case. I think it should be said, selling is wonderful if you haven't been cut down from it. You know what I mean? In other words, and most of us have. Mm-hmm. I've heard it said that there's no such thing as a born salesman, they're all trained. Well, I take the other view on that too. I say that we're all born salespeople. It's just that some of us have been detrained, untrained, boxed in by well-meaning but and loving parents, siblings, bosses, teachers, or what have you. I mean, I've been appalled at some of the things I've heard teachers say in classrooms about salespeople and what have you. It's sort of like very few people have been reared to be salespeople.
Kind of like speak only when called upon.
Really. Yeah, I've had, I know our children were in that environment all their lives, and they had perceptions of that, and all of them have distinguished themselves. No, that's not true. Most of them have distinguished themselves incredibly in the sales industry because they weren't conditioned against it. They were prepared for it, not pushed into it, because that's another issue. But those who chose it have really, really done well because they didn't hear the typical stuff, you know, about if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. All our kids were taught that if something is worth doing, it's worth starting badly. In other words, don't be afraid to be clumsy and inept and inadequate. Don't be afraid to embarrass yourself occasionally, because you're always going to get better if you're just in the practice process.
They understand that well. Yeah. They've understood that throughout the years.
Exactly. And they were all led from the very young to be independent, not to be dependent upon mom or dad to solve their problems. For example, they would come home with their challenges that were normally jumped on by parents. I remember one time I had one of the kids come home who was really a capable sales guy. Matter of fact, right now he has offices overlooking Rockefeller Center in New York City, and doing quite well. Can go where he wants, do what he wants, with whom he wants. You know, really doing well.
It's a nice place to be.
Yeah, but I remember one time he came home. I think he was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, and he said that I had to go see the principal for him to get back in school. He'd been expelled, and I said, I didn't mess up, you know. I'm not going to go see the principal. You know, I did that when I was in school, but I'm not going to do it anymore. And I said, you're going to have to work this out. You know what I mean? And he pondered, just a little kid. He worked at it all weekend, and we never really discussed it. You know, but Monday morning, he was all dressed up in a shirt and tie and kind of really presented himself well. And I figured, well, he's got something going. You know, so we turned him loose. He went over to the school, and it was a parochial type school at the time, and they had morning worships on Monday morning, and so he induced the kid that was going to say the morning prayer to let him do that, because he'd figured out that's when the principal came in during that morning prayer. He had figured that out, and so there he was doing the morning prayer
in communication.
Yeah, in communication and in the love mode and what have you, and they just didn't press it. He was back in school. Now, that was a mistake on their part. But the thing is, he had solved his problem. And I remember some of our kids as young as 10, 12, 13 years old doing major projects that would require them to go out and get the job done. In other words, sell an idea, sell a concept, sell tickets, whatever it happened to be. And when they were real little, I remember them coming home wanting extra money. And I said, well, I mean, there's a one sure way. You can go out and sell. And I remember all three kids one time had a cutlery project. They wanted to make some extra money, so I said, okay. I was in a place where I could buy these cutlery sets for very little money, and I could buy them for like $2 a piece. They had a $12.50 price tag on the box, and they could sell them for $8 and make a bundle.
Sure.
And we sent them out going door to door, and they all came back with the stories I hear today. You know what I mean? One of them, I remember Rochelle said, "Dad, why do people lie when they don't have to?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I had several ladies tell me that there was someone by just yesterday selling these, and they had gotten some." And she said, "I know that's not true." I said, "Oh, you're right." I said, but that's their fear. They're not prepared to do it any other way. Didn't know what to say, so they said the wrong thing.
Well, my goodness.
And you have to forgive them.
Right.
And so even back then, I said, we got to be sympathetic with those people and understand that they don't know how to do it any other way. And so even back then, they were learning to embrace disappointment as part of the process.
And proceed.
Yeah. And so now we've got great salespeople in the family. I'm talking some superstars too. But they were prepared for it, and most people haven't. So they've been de-prepared. Now, other things happen. For example, a child might lose a parent too young, and they look out at the world and get a faulty perception of the way things work. I've seen that quite often. We've had some major breakthroughs in addressing bereavement issues. And it's something that's never talked about in a sales meeting.
Yeah, that's normally not even touched on.
Yeah, it's like taboo even. Don't get into those areas.
But you've introduced this to me, and now I see it real clear. This has everything to do. In fact, it's actually the crucial point. Yeah. What has gone on prior to entering the sales environment? Exactly. Remember, I hadn't planned on being in selling, but here I am.
So I don't care how great a sales manager might be, how much of a mentor and a teacher. It's pretty hard to create a masterpiece with rocky clay.
Right.
And, when we recruit someone, oftentimes they come with their white shirt and tie and shiny teeth and a, nice suit.
Good-looking shoes and a car.
And we don't know who they are. We really don't know who they are.
And it doesn't matter what's written on their resume either.
And when it comes to selling, they don't know who they are. They don't know what they're bringing to the table. You see, years ago, as far back as 57, I wanted to research this problem in order to find ways, couldn't be just one, I'm sure of that, but an accumulation of concepts and ideas, subtle separately, but tied together became substantive in making a difference in a sales career. And I realized after a while that most of the material that we were developing was applicable to everybody. You mean, in other words, it's who comes to the table. If that person is healthy-minded, clear-headed, in other words, they're in command of their attitude, their perspectives and what have you, they're going to be champions. And if they're not, then we need to assist them in breaking through without having to go to 2 and 3 and 5 years of therapy. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of this information is really breakthrough. Now, I identify breakthrough in a special way. It's that moment of realization, understanding, where a person goes, "Oh, I've got a solution. Didn't even know I had a problem." Because I thought that's the way things were.
And they have a whole new level of objectivity.
Exactly. And they become objective instead of subjective. It's a major, major shift. Now, not everybody gets it. I think everybody could, if they persisted and integrated the information. I think you know that what we do is a series of essays, often called seminars, which would be inappropriate because that's not what we do. They're essays. Essay means to attempt, to try, to research, okay, to experiment.
To discover.
Yeah, and to discover, and then essay means the report. And so what we're doing are a selection of verbal essays about this concept of recapturing our authority and esteem. As a matter of fact, I brought this time. We have a thing, everybody has a mission statement. Well, the name of our company is Command, and we have a Command Commission. Rather than just a mission statement, it's called the Command Commission. And it's to assist people in their efforts to recapture and develop their authority. In other words, if a person has all their authority and esteem in place, who would they dare not call on? Yeah, you'd be constantly available to the world if you had your authority in place.
Let's make sure our viewers don't misunderstand, and in the context of a salesperson, what type of authority do you mean as a salesperson would have? To be and have it appropriately.
To accept your capacities, yourselves, your communication skills, to understand people, to realize that when they're in a state of rejection, it's not you or your product, it's their life. A lot of it is to step away from accommodation, which is what our life primarily is based on. I had a lady, Tina Deller Smith, I believe I have permission to use her name, some years ago in the Sacramento area, where the real estate market was like dead, real quiet.
Tough environment, I remember that.
She was managing about $300,000 a month in business, which was quite awesome. It was as much as some offices were getting at the time. And people were just awed by her. How does she do it? Well, she did it by working day and night, 7 days a week. She neglected her health and her family and everything else, but she was getting the business. She went through this series and recaptured the authority, the esteem elevated somewhat, and it always gives you more initiative, by the way.
Sure.
See, authority and esteem gives you an initiative, thereby assuring more happiness, peace of mind, and prosperity. With Tina, it was a 300% to 400% increase in that business in less time, which is kind of exciting. I have a letter in my files at home where she talks about all the weight she lost, the renewal of her relationship, and this accelerated business, and then she was even teaching and speaking about some of the materials she'd learned. That's pretty exciting.
That is exciting, and that's why at Command, where we start to, if we focus just on selling, what we find out is the life, the living, and the making a living all seamlessly tied together in the series.
Yes.
And without actually spending due time on all three of those, it'd be doing disservice to everything else.
There's no question. See, we have what I call 3 trilogies that we do. The first trilogy.
Profile those, please.
Yeah, very quickly here. The first trilogy is re-preparation. Re-preparation. Not preparation, but re-preparation. In other words, going back and taking a second look at our past, re-perceiving it, utilizing some tools that we have for recapturing authority and esteem. Very, very powerful. And this includes Life Formula, which is a 10-word verbal formula that we put together consisting of a harmony of dichotomies, we call it, that once integrated creates an icon that a person can kind of carry around in their mind that allows them to be objective instead of subjective. That's a wow for a salesperson.
It's very powerful.
If you can stay objective, you're really in command. It's about the Command Commission, recapturing authority and esteem, primarily through reperception of the past, and then breaking bottlenecks of bereavement. Not just death, but
losses, lacks.
Lost jobs. There are a lot of people who go into selling, because they lost their business or they lost their job. Well, they're in bereavement.
Something else hasn't worked out, and now they're going to try to sell.
Here they are.
Good luck.
And until we address that and have the tools to address it, and by the way, it's very copyable. Sales manager can go through this thing 1 or 2 times, and he can do it himself and be conscious of when it's necessary.
If they integrate the material.
Oh, no question. So re-preparation, I call it Velcroizing. Remember the term?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, after this, stuff begins to stick. The second trilogy is acceleration. And we take the liberty with the word, and we do it this way, acceleration. That was excellence, if you would, or excelling, but acceleration. And we have to put a quote around that. And what this is 3 essays designed to move it quicker, get it done, accelerate. One of the essays is strategizing. That's my own word. But it's something I saw on a New Hampshire farm when I was 9 years old that identified a law of nature that dictates success and failure that's been misunderstood. Well, how do I dare say that? Been misunderstood because of the results we're getting socially. The 80-20, the 90-10, the 97-3. In other words, something is amiss here. There's a big question mark around those. And this addresses some of those things. Acceleration. Then there's one on puzzling, which I have so much fun with. It addresses the myth and the mythology of goal setting. Not against goal setting. I just take a jaundiced look at the language that's employed around it.
There's a lot of
faulty
language in the whole goal setting process.
Well, there must be, because, once again,
go back to the
we
rates.
always go back to this. And then we talk about matters of confidence. This is a fun essay. And some tools about how to get the mind to work for us instead of against us, because there's a battle going on inside, and if we're not careful, we lose.
You bet.
Yeah. And then the third trilogy is the selling trilogy. It's on creative, direct sales. Now, quite frankly, we have a lot of homemakers and students go through this because these techniques can be applied in every facet of our life, but certainly in a sales environment. The first essay is about the psychology of being in selling. The second is on persuasive finalizing, my word for closing, and then the third one is on a criteria of success, which is quite different than most people are accustomed to.
That basically, in a nutshell, is the series. It's capsulized quite a bit. You know I'm an advocate of the whole series, and please, our viewers out there, give the series consideration. It's just unbelievable. In fact, you wouldn't believe it until you see it. But preparation might draw the circle graph of how business gets done.
Let's do it this way this time.
How relationships continue successfully. And you can start to pull each one of these and see preparation. We got 30% of business, if you will.
See, out here, there's a whole lot of prospecting going on.
Right.
And sales calls and what have you. And what this represents are the sales that are made. Okay?
They're right there.
Now, we're not saying these figures apply to all the people that you encounter, but these are the sales that are made. And I'm going to kind of go down here and just a little bit off center. And then I'm going to draw a figure, see the third, probably somewhere in there. Would that do it?
That's close enough.
Okay. This is a circle graph where it shows that 30% of all the sales that are made, and that's a pretty good chunk, are made just because you're there. Last week we talked about the sales industry. The managers oftentimes thinking of that as suckers and mullets and easy marks and rollovers. But the fact of the matter is these people bought in spite of the salesperson, oftentimes.
In other words, a salesperson comes to work in the morning. They've already prepared their day the night before. They're functioning well. They don't start functioning 15 minutes before 5 o'clock.
Right, exactly.
They've actually began functioning the night before. They've planned their day. They know who they're going to talk to. They've got it laid out, and they show up and they're well functioning. Now, here in the series is where they, through re-preparation,
are able to be there.
Able to be there.
Yep.
Through talks like the Life Formula and others.
Yep.
So that's extremely valuable.
See, here's the thing. That should be very encouraging to any salesperson, because all you got to do is show up, and you're going to get your share of the sales. And by the way, this doesn't matter who made that call. It can be the old pro or the neophyte, the man or the woman. It doesn't matter. I remember my first sales call that I ever made was, it was there. I mean, I'll tell you.
The order could be tied to a brick and thrown through a window.
Yeah, and they take it. The check would be good.
Right.
Yeah, fascinating. What's really exciting is another 55% over here. 55% of all the sales that are made because you care. Now that the salesperson, I call it the adoptive process, where the salesperson has the capacity to genuinely care about who he's calling on, and therefore become adoptable themselves. So there's a little double work going on there. But this person also cares about his company, cares about his product enough to know all about it, cares enough about his family to be there You know what I mean? In other words, there's a lot of caring about this. And this is based on what we have to identify as love. I'm not talking about sexual or passionate, but
a nurturance and affinity.
yeah, an affinity for people and really wanting to make a difference. And then 15% of the sales that are made are because we're aware. And last week, I think you said aware of what? We're talking about closing techniques, just the right close to use at just the right time, when to present the order blank, when to keep quiet, this type of thing. What's really fascinating, most of our training in selling is occurring right in here. And I've really come to a point in my life where most of the time we spend getting good at this, okay, is an avoidance of this one. In other words, if we can get good enough at closing, we don't have to call on as many people,
which is prospecting,
and we don't have to care as much.
Cold calling.
And that's not true.
No,
it's
it's not true.
It'll backfire on you every time.
Now, to look at this for our viewers, this is exciting. 85% of the business is caring, being adoptive, being in contribution,
Right.
and functionally being there.
Oh, and by the way, I'm not discounting this.
No.
If you care, that allows for what I call contributive audacity. Contributive audacity. This is the closing power. In other words, contributive audacity. The audacity to say and do things that move that prospect to the sale, and with the eye of being contributive when you're doing it. Not doing it just for the sale, but so that he'll have the product. And you can't do that. See, if you're not there out of love, you've lost a lot of power.
Exactly.
See, you're not going to get away with this if you're there out of fear and manipulation. You're not going to get away with it.
Now,
I can give you some examples of that, but I don't think we have time.
Yeah. Now, for some of our salespeople out there that have their heels dug in and say, no, I'm looking at the series, closing techniques and, issues of selling. No, that's for me only. Learning what contribution and adaptability is all about, strategizing, contribution.
Yep, exactly.
Truly being in the love mode, life formula. So what we find, interesting enough, is some of the topics that typically somebody wanting to improve their relationship with their spouse or their significant or their children happens to be the same material that is completely applicable in the selling environment.
Right, exactly.
Actually, it's wonderful. I think it's great. But I wanted to make that point.
Yeah. And the thing of it is that we say, well, we sell all the time, and it's true. I think sometimes we carry that a little bit far, but we do have to sell our children on being good and our spouse on being,
Well, they're the toughest ones to persuade.
Sure.
They look at you and, what are you talking about?
I'll tell you one thing I found too, Rick, that a lot of people, consumers, will go through this series on selling so that they can find out how to buy.
It's very helpful for that.
See, for years, when I was in the more aggressive state, one of the things I used to teach salespeople, I said, look, you're not going to run into anybody out here, ever, who's been trained on how not to buy. They don't go to classes for that.
Right.
They don't have any training classes,
how not
any
to
role
buy.
playing on how not to buy. And here we devote our time on how to sell. So we should have the upper hand. It's true, too.
Right.
And therefore, our closing ratio shouldn't be 1 out of 3, but more like 85, 90%. Now, why isn't it sometimes? Because we're trying to sell everybody because of results orientation. That's another thing that can really get in the way of success.
See, we start to cover that in the this part of the series.
I understand from a corporate point of view and the sales manager's point of view that this has to be the driving force, results.
It's the bottom line.
They call it the bottom line. It's not a good psychic posture, which is something we teach in here, for the salesperson, however. It's really odd that if a person, I've watched carefully over the years, that if people who are really result-oriented, you get to a point where they don't know where to go to get one. For example, I will admit I've been doing what I do for years, and I don't know where I can go tomorrow morning and write up a enrollment or get an enrollment for our series. I don't know.
Me neither, for sure.
Yeah, and
That's
so
some ideas, but
if a guy's result-oriented, and that's the only reason for leaving the house, and he doesn't know where to go, it's easy not to go. It's easy not to go. And I see that in results-oriented people, in addition, spend a great deal of their time either isolating or celebrating. I did it my first day in selling, and I have a propensity to do it today. And what that means is that if you don't know where to go to get a sale, you don't go. Or if you go and you miss one, you go home and get in the bed, you get under the covers, or end up in a movie house sitting alone in a dark theater because things weren't going right. Or driving around in your car.
Right. On a gradient, those are the more extreme cases of isolating, but it could, on a lesser gradient, but still just as tragic, reorganizing the desk, organizing my files.
Yep. It's all isolating.
Yeah. Yep. Instead of calling somebody or going to see somebody, tell the story one more time.
Or celebrating. So the results-oriented guy has a great day, and he's out celebrating.
Sure.
He goes to the movie, and he justifies that. Or he goes out and calls on his fun clients, the ones who are warm fuzzies.
Let's go play golf.
Yeah, well, they go play golf, and they lose a lot of business. So it's more process orientation. As a process-oriented salesperson is going to win every single time, because regardless of what happened yesterday, good or bad, he's doing the process today. Okay.
He already knows there's going to be some either way.
Oh, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's going to be this constantly. Now, there's another thing too, that to recognize that it's not a selling business nearly as much as it is a prospecting business, and the correlating process is the prospecting process. Now, when I mean correlating, I use that instead of qualifying. Mm-hmm. I've always been a little put off by qualifying a prospect. I understand, but I never liked the term. But to correlate my product, goods, and services with your needs, okay, and when I find a match, to make that sale in my own mind and heart, it was the total assumption, this is a sale, and to change my tenses in communication, putting them all into past tense so that all you're left with is to allow the decision or disallow it. See, in other words, it's unkind to depend upon prospects to make decisions. They're not used to doing that, so we make the decision, and then they're left to allow it or disallow it. If they've adopted you, it's easy for them to allow it. And you're talking about master salesmanship here, that there's no books written. There's no books written. A lot of this stuff is not being taught anywhere because I wanted to come outside that normal stream and say, hey, wait a minute. I'm not satisfied with the results that we've been getting from what we've been teaching. Audacious? Yes, but it's contributive.
Well, it is being taught, Bern. It's being taught at command, isn't it?
Yes, it is, on a regular basis, and we've run out of time, and I can't believe this is...
yeah. We're having too much fun, I think.
This has been Life Talk.
Right.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Get out of here.